Hi, I'm Deanna Joe, and welcome to my channel, Responsible Faith. Today, I have a special guest, Mary, and she is going to share her story of spiritual abuse and all the things that she's experienced at the hands of the church. And the purpose of this video is to share stories that people can hopefully see themselves in and not feel alone if they've experienced an abusive situation within churches. And unfortunately, it is far too common. And so, Mary, welcome to my channel.
Hi, thanks for
Hi.
having me.
So I do know from us talking earlier that the church that you got involved in college was actually a UPCI church.
Yes, that's correct.
So how did that come to be?
Well, the church that I was raised in was really, really small. There were only probably 8 to 10 people ever at that church, and there were no real young people except for my sister. My sister and I were pretty much the youth group. I had wished for a long time that I could go to a church that had services more often, that I could get involved with a youth group, that they had activities. I really wanted to connect in and not just go once a week to Sunday school. I was very spiritual minded and everything, and I wanted to learn and I wanted to be a part of something. When I got to college, there weren't but a couple of churches in town. My parents objected to pretty much all of them except for one, and that one had one service a week, no youth, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So I tried looking at other churches, and the one that I ended up in was this UPC church. What I liked about them was that they had a lot of services, they had a lot of activities, all of those things that I had been looking for. And they said, and I began to believe, that they had the truth, that they had things to believe that I had never been taught before, that were in the Bible, that I wanted to know more about.
And the UPC, to its credit, does have quite a close-knit fellowship and a lot of activities and stuff like that. So what was it like for you? I mean, that had to be quite a transition in college age. Oh, there's the kitty.
I guess.
That had to be quite a transition at a college age, knowing that as a female, all those rules and stuff. What was that like?
The rules didn't really bother me. To me, it was part of it. There were things that I had grown up with that were not necessarily the same, but it was, you had to wear a one-piece bathing suit at camp, or there was a time that I had thought, I want to be known as different, to be known that I'm following God more, and I started wearing skirts on my own because of that. Different things like that had happened, and I said, oh well, this is just more of what I already knew. It's just at a greater depth, and so I actually thought it was a good thing. There were things that were hard. I had just gotten a pixie cut, and growing out my hair was horrible.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any money, so getting new clothes and things like that was really difficult.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, still, I saw it very much as, this is the right thing to do. This is getting me closer to God. And so the first while that I was in church and through college, it wasn't a big deal to me. The standards, actually, even after 19 years and even after all of the abuse that had taken place, the standards weren't part of the reason that I left, and were part of the reason that I was scared to leave.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the first church that you went to, talk about the lice story, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
goodness. So right after I graduated from college, I moved into my own apartment. First time I'd been in my own apartment, but I had been helping a girl out, a teenager who had a large family situation, just having her over every once in a while. And her little sister started begging, when I got my own place and everything, that she wanted to be able to come and have a sleepover. The pastor and pastor's wife really, really encouraged that I be doing this for the little sister. It wasn't something I wanted to do. We decided, okay, well, we would do it. She got to my house that night, and several things happened. She did not come prepared. She did not have her own hairbrush. She did not have clothes. So there was a lot of parenting that I did that night. I got up in the morning and found out that she had not brought her hairbrush. And when I started brushing my hair that morning, she came in and said, "Oh, by the way, don't use your hairbrush. I did, and I have lice."
She knew she had lice.
Yes, come to find out, she had been treated for lice the morning of the day that she was sent to my house. The mother thought that everything was fine, that she didn't have lice anymore because she had been treated that morning. So she used my bedding, she used my hairbrush, and it was a Saturday night, Sunday, and so I got to church that morning and said, "I can't believe this has happened. This is horrible." I was freaking out, and the pastor and pastor's wife pulled me aside and said, "You do not say anything about this. Yes, we knew, but this is a done deal. You have not got anything. She treated her that morning. Everything is fine." And I'm saying, "No, everything is not fine." Well, I ended up with head lice. And the pastor and pastor's wife still insisted, "No, you're not going to say anything. You are not going to embarrass this family. You're not going to say anything to anybody about this. You don't have head lice. This is all in your head." So it got worse and worse and worse to the point that I was pulling live bugs out of my hair.
Oh.
And I kept talking to the pastor and pastor's wife and saying, "There's a problem. There's a real problem. I need help." Finally, one night, I called him and I said, "I can't come to church tonight, and I will not come back until I can get this under control. I can't risk spreading this all over the church." And the pastor said, "Okay, look, I'm tired of this. I'm going to send this registered nurse to check you out. And when she says you don't have lice, you do whatever she says, and we're done with this." She came to my house and absolutely freaked out. She said she had never seen a case of lice as bad in her life.
That's awful.
She told me to go to the hospital and that they would cut my hair short and treat me for lice, which of course is completely against the rules. I am not supposed to cut my hair ever at all, much less short. And she's saying, "You're going to go to the hospital." And he has just told me I'm going to do whatever she tells me to do.
Mm-hmm.
She walks out and just leaves me. And I am sitting on my floor just bawling because I've got a boyfriend I can't explain this to. The church is going to think I'm backslid. I'm supposed to do whatever she says according to the pastor, but I can't explain to anybody else why I'm going to have an emergency room bill and treatment that I cannot afford. And so I'm just sitting there bawling. And he calls. She had gone to the church and gone into his office and ripped him up.
Okay.
He sent a whole group of ladies to the house that night to treat everything in the house. And my boyfriend came over right after church to find out what was going on, what kind of special project was going on at my house that all the ladies had to go to. Found out that I had head lice. He freaked out. That was the last of our dating. I thought we were going to get married. I thought he was going to propose to me anytime. And he just absolutely wigged out, and he was done. And I still had to treat this for another couple of months on my own, trying to make sure that I got everything because it was so bad.
Yeah. So that would be a prime example of overreach.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the pastor's telling you to do this, then you do it, and it ends up being a mess, which he knew ahead of time. And then it turns around and he tells you, keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything about this.
Keep your mouth shut and ignore what all evidence you see, because it can't really be that you're right. And we're not going to check to find out.
Right.
We're just going to say no.
And here you are young. Like, how old were you?
I was 22.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So you're on your own, you're trying to figure this out, and you're really dependent heavily on the advice of the adults around you.
Yes.
Yeah. So you also mentioned the missions trip that you went on, and this was the same church?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So 3 years after all of that had happened, there was a missions trip. I had wanted to be a missionary for years. Had actually gone to college thinking that I was going to go into missions after college. But I had an opportunity to go on a missions trip to Brazil. And 3 weeks, awesome experience. I was so excited about it. And instead of there being any the church didn't even acknowledge that I was going. It was there. I supported myself. I got everything together, but there was nothing from the church, no acknowledgement that I was going to go, that I had been, and until finally I had said something enough times, and the pastor said, "Oh, all right, you can have a few minutes to say your piece and then be done with it." But it was while I was on the trip, the other girls on the trip were saying, yeah, their churches were all behind them. They were so excited. They were going to come home and they were going to do this and they were going to do that. And they had done all of this stuff for them. And I'm thinking, my church didn't even acknowledge that I was going.
That's so unusual in the UPC, because UPC does have a tendency towards being very missions focused.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the last straw for me on that church. I decided that when I got back, I had actually quit my job when I went. The job was not going well, and I went ahead and quit instead of taking 3 weeks off because I would have been unpaid anyway. I quit my job, and when I got back, I was having trouble finding one. It was a very economically depressed area, and I said, I need to start looking for another church. I need to move to where I can actually succeed. And so he encouraged me that summer to, within weeks of me getting back, to go ahead and start talking to the camp evangelist that year and encouraging me to go to his church. It was about 3 hours from mine. It was in another section. I didn't know anything about him, but I trusted my pastor. I got there, and this guy actually told me that it wasn't in the Bible that a woman shouldn't cut her hair, that a woman could wear pants. He's right, but that's not something a UPC pastor should be saying. And it really, really upset me. I think at this time, I really feel like that pastor, the first pastor that I had sent me there knowing that I would go and would not get along with that pastor, would be upset by the lack of standards and some of the other things going on there, and would go running back to him and never leave.
Because you were very conservative minded at the time.
Not compared to what I was later, but yes.
Yeah.
And I referred to skirts and hair and stuff like that as the basics. Those were the basic standards.
Okay.
And this guy was ignoring the basics.
Okay.
Oddly enough, that was at a time when he was signing an affirmation statement every year saying that he was teaching these things.
Yeah. So then that church did not work out. That was not what you were looking for. So you found a conservative church to go to, and you went there, still within the UPC.
Yes.
Okay. How did that one go?
So 30 miles from the one that I had moved to, there was this nice conservative smaller church that I had gone to a rally at, and it seemed like that they had everything that I was looking for as far as standards. And so I was going to be safe because they had good standards. That was safety. They allowed me to come, but I was warned when I left the radically liberal church that I better be very, very careful, that this other pastor was known for throwing people out.
Which is so crazy to me, because I don't know what it, like, I know when I was in the UPC, you rarely ever heard of anyone ever anywhere throwing anyone out of the church.
I had never ever heard of anybody being thrown out of a church, and I kind of blew it off as because I knew one of the families had gone to this liberal church, so I knew them in a roundabout way at least, and I just kind of thought, well, The pastor and the family just didn't get along. Surely there was more to the story. I wasn't going to listen to the gossip. And this was a good pastor. He actually taught the standards. Things were fine for a year or two. Things started getting not fine. The pastor and his family went through some things. There were some other instances where people were in trouble, but I didn't understand everything that was going on, and it was kind of put out that they had left, but I didn't really get it. There were some things that I struggled with there. The teaching was horrifically harsh. There was a sermon that was preached by an evangelist that came through. Evangelist came and taught that you're part of the body of Christ, and if the hand is cut off from the body, the hand dies. So if you're thrown out, you cannot be saved. You're cut off from God if you're thrown out of a church. And I believed it.
Wow, does that ever give a lot of power to ministers and churches?
Yes.
They override the blood of Jesus, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, because in this sermon, the way that it was taught out was that, okay, yeah, it's not that they're overriding the blood of Jesus, it's that you're cut off from the blood of Jesus because you're not part of the body anymore. But things started happening. I was asked to teach a Sunday school class. I was very, very involved with everything. And I finally figured out I was giving about 30% of my income to the church in various ways. Finally, we had a Sunday school class. They wanted me to be a clown in the class for this series of lessons. And the pastor's wife brought me a pair of rainbow tights. And she said, try them on. I'm excited about this and everything. And I said, well, okay, And the pastor, I walked out to show her, and the pastor saw me. It was at the church. And he said, get those things off. Well, in his mindset, wild-colored stockings was a sin. It attracted your eye to the woman's leg, and she was enticing you. Apparently, the pastor's wife didn't know that.
I guess not.
But it was my fault for putting them on.
Of course.
And several things like that happened. But as time went on, he started encouraging me. There was a younger man that started attending who was about 10 years younger than I was. And then there was a little bit older man who started attending with his daughter. And the older man had not spoken in tongues, but he started encouraging me to be the youth leader for these two young men, just the three of us.
That's an unusual situation.
Yes, and especially in that church, because even if you were engaged to somebody, you were not supposed to be alone with them in any situation, not even to walk in Walmart together.
Wow.
So I kept saying, I can't do this. Well, then I was going against him.
Rebellion.
Yes. And I must not want to be married.
Okay, so that was what it was.
Yes. It was a setup. I was being very pushed toward more the older guy. But no. And the older guy, I lived across the street and upstairs from the bar where he threw a man through the window of the bar. This was not the kind of guy I wanted to be dating.
No.
So it was bad. But I think probably to push me to marry somebody, the pastor started saying he would communicate to the husbands, and the husbands would communicate to their wives. He didn't need to tell any woman in the church anything, which left me out. It left several of us out, but it left me out. And
I'm sure he was still willing to take your tithes.
Oh, yeah.
To take all the ladies' tithes, they just don't have the right to know anything that's going on.
Right.
Right.
And so I got to Sunday school one morning and found out that they were going on a trip. The pastor's wife was the main Sunday school teacher. I was one of the people playing the piano. The pastor was the other one. Everything that I was involved in, I should have been told so that I could prepare music, so that I could plan the Sunday school lessons without her being there. And got to Sunday school that morning, and I found out through the grapevine that they were going on a vacation or going on an evangelical trip, whatever.
You would have been expected to pick up the slack and to teach Sunday
Yes.
school and to prepare the music, but nobody told you ahead of time.
Nope.
Nope.
And I started crying and in Sunday school because it topped everything else that had gone on already. And he called me in and said, "You've got to stop this." He also accused me of lusting after him and told me that if it wasn't changed that if I didn't change my heart by the time he got back, that he would throw me out.
So what was the age range of you versus him roughly?
We were not that far apart in age. I don't know exactly how old he was. I'm not sure I ever really knew. He was probably 7 or 8 years older than I am, but not out of range for, but I wasn't interested in him. And he was married. And so it was really
And
strange.
he had been angry with you for tights.
Yes. But when he said that I was lusting after him, my immediate gut reaction was no.
Yeah.
When I said that, he went off on me for being rebellious. He told me that my heart was wicked and I didn't know what was in my own heart, but he did. And God had shown him, and that I better repent. I better get everything right. And I was confused. I was hurt. I was scared. I decided that I was just going to fast until they returned. It was going to be about a week. They got delayed. So 5 days into my fast, I find out that they're not coming back for another week or two. I had to break my fast. There was no way I was going to be able to keep going without eating anything. It actually had some permanent health effects on me. But tried to contact them by phone, got reprimanded for that. And the reason that I wanted to was so that I could find out that everything was okay and could break my fast. And he never, ever thought about that.
Because you had so much anxiety surrounding the fact that things were not right with you and the pastor, and that you were worried about your standing at the church and what this was. I mean, you had past bad experiences to draw on here too.
Right. But nothing like this, because I would have never imagined. And actually, when things started going bad, one of the thoughts that I had was, well, how much worse can it get? It's not like he's going to throw me out or anything. Well, so much for that one.
So he did throw you out.
So he did. They got back and they had the first service, and I waited for something to come down in service and hear something during the service, and nothing. And I waited around after the service, asked it permission to take the trash out after the service, even because that's how low I felt at that point. Nothing still was said. And when I got home that night, I got a phone call, and he called me to tell me that I was never to come back.
So he didn't even have the courage to say it to your face.
No. So
that must have been devastating.
It was. And it was terrifying, because I believed that I had to stay in church or I was going to lose out with God. May have already lost out with God. One of the things that he said when he threw me out was, "I don't even know if you can be saved," which backed up what this sermon had been about the hand that got cut off. And he had actually preached that night, that last service, but somebody would walk out that night and never come back and cut her hair and wear pants and everything. And so apparently that somebody was supposed to be me.
I got that.
Which was part of the reason that I refused to cut my hair or wear pants after I left, because I was going to prove that he was a false prophet.
Hey, you weren't going to let him be right about that.
Nope. Within a couple of years after I left, he had actually thrown out or run off pretty much everybody that I knew there, except for one woman and her kids. She and her husband got a divorce. One woman and her kids in his own family. But he actually set a mother and parents against a son. He tried to divide up a family, a husband and wife. This other wife had gotten a divorce from her husband. So there were a lot of really bad divisions there
Yeah.
that started. But yeah, so I was out.
So
And
out again. I mean, that must have been a weird feeling.
it was scary. It
Yeah.
was really scary.
So then you found the the church that we're kind of aiming towards here to talk
Yeah.
about, because you actually have an audio recording of the abuse that went on in that church, and we're going to play that in a bit.
Yes.
So talk about that.
I tried to find a good church, again, one with good standards, after I got kicked out, and I had a lot of trouble finding a church that would take me
Because
because I didn't come with a letter of recommendation.
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, now tell us why, because this is not a thing for every area or like when I was UPC several years ago, this was not a thing.
Oh, really?
I didn't know of it being a thing that you had to have a letter of recommendation, but I know that the same churches that I knew of back then now do kind of require that. So it's changed. So you had no letter of recommendation.
No letter of recommendation. And on top of that, a former pastor who had kicked me out. And I wasn't gonna lie about that. When they asked me why I needed to move, I said, honestly, this happened. But I just want to find a good church. And repeatedly, I was told, one of the most local churches said, well, come and we'll lay hands on you and feel your spirit and determine whether you're telling me the truth or not. No. I ended up calling a church in Kansas that I was familiar with that was more conservative. And that church ended up, the pastor said I could go there. That was the Westberg's church in Junction City.
Yes. And just as a side note, I want to just give clarification of who the Westbergs were, because this is the gentleman who brought forth the resolution in the 90s that caused a massive split in the UPC. Yes. And he was trying to get rid of the heretics, basically. I'm just going to read a little section from this book, Christianity Without the Cross. So I just wanted to read this. It says, the issue of holiness was also of concern to Westberg, but it cannot be said to have been the central or sole issue. Westberg confirmed that assumption. Notwithstanding this, the diversification of holiness standards was something Westberg could not abide gladly, and he denounced those who did not share his views on holiness standards as, now this is quoted, perverts, dogs, vile, pile of trash, demon-possessed, heretics, hypocrites, cats, and so on.
Wow.
And so that he referenced that it was from a sermon at a conference before the Salt Lake City General Conference in 1992, and it was cited from a letter to Nathaniel Urshan that was sent on April 8th, 1993. So just to lay a little foundation of Mr. Westberg, take it from there. This is your new church.
Yeah, so this is my new church. Well, between the resolution and the time that I started going there, my best guess from what I've seen is that he shot himself in the leg. He had a pretty massive injury and was laid up for a while. And during that time, I think some things changed for him as far as how he saw some things or how he thought about some of the things that he had done. He was never cruel to me.
Okay.
He was actually fairly gentle with me, surprisingly so to people who had been under him in the past, who had also left. And surprisingly so, considering what all brags there were and boasts about the things that he had done to people in the past, even.
So it was a matter of pride at that church, that any harshness was a matter of pride?
Yes, yes.
Well, okay, so I am going to jump now to Westberg passes and the new guy comes.
There were a lot of people who felt called to Faith Tabernacle.
Oh, my goodness,
It's a
self-supporting.
500-person church. Yeah, there was
Always
a
called
lot.
a lot of people to those self-supporting churches.
Yeah, but Edwin Young had been, they called them horsemen. They were young ministers at Faith Tabernacle, had been sent out from there, had gone to preach in California. Sister Westberg decided that she felt that he was the right person to come back and take the church. So he did. So when she announced that he had accepted and he was coming back, people ran the aisles. They shouted and they told me he's going to come back and he's going to clean everything up. All that Westberg has been lax on for the last several years.
Okay, because you think Westberg mellowed a little bit in with
I think so.
age and stuff. So they were looking forward to somebody coming in there and
Yes.
cleaning house.
Yes.
Wow.
He came, and one of the first things he did was he let one of the men come back who had been kicked out for stalking and actually threatening the fiance of the woman that he was stalking. And that man started stalking me instead. That went on for 6 years.
6 years.
Stalked me for 6 years.
I can't even imagine what that would do to your mental health.
It was, yeah. Well, and I'm fairly certain that he came to my house and looked in my windows. He followed me around the grocery stores. He concerned the grocery store security clerk enough that the security clerks would come to me and ask me if I was okay. So things were okay for a while other than that, but he started getting more and more upset with me because I was coming to him as the pastor and saying, this man is stalking me. Now, for starters, you're not supposed to be alone with any man by yourself. And this man is coming and looking in my windows.
Yeah.
This man is following me around the grocery store, and he believes that God has given me him.
Okay, so you knew that he believed that.
Yes. So this is something that if I don't say something, then it almost looks like I'm okay with it. We weren't supposed to touch. We weren't supposed to hold hands with somebody. We weren't supposed to kiss. We weren't supposed to be together any place by ourselves. And this man's coming to my house and looking in my windows. He's following me around the grocery store and he's claiming that I am God's gift to him. He's
So you weren't allowed to kiss or hold hands or anything
no,
even if you were dating?
no. Your first kiss, the first time you were to hold hands was when the pastor said, okay, now join hands. The first time you were kissed was when he said, you may kiss the bride. Yes.
How many people you actually think made it that far? Come on.
I don't know. There were some that either did or were very good at keeping secrets, because there were people that got married and didn't get kicked out. And if they had gotten caught, they would have been kicked out.
Wow. Okay. No kissing, no holding hands.
Nope. Um, so the guy is stalking me. I'm trying to tell the pastor so that I don't get in trouble with that. He starts getting mad at me for coming to him. His response was finally to call me and this guy to his office. His big thing in Westberg's was to call a bunch of people to the office after church service at night and just have them wait in a long, long line until he was ready to talk to them. Well, calling a woman and the man who is stalking her to sit in outside of his office, it was abusive in itself.
Yeah.
It prevented me from saying a lot. But he finally got to the point where he got so mad at me for keeping coming to him that he said, fine, if this is really happening, then the next time it happens, you just call the police. Don't call me about this. You just call the police if this happens again and let them take care of it. Okay. So not too long after that, I got home one night and there were tire tracks up my driveway and through my yard. And I called the police And I said, I need you to come and document this because there is a man stalking me. So they came, but what I didn't know is that they also, as a standard procedure, called the domestic violence group in town and reported to them that this was going on. They called me several times over the next few months. Is everything okay? We're checking in. And I avoided saying anything to them until one night the stalking was really, really bad. He was following me around the church, speaking in tongues, telling me that I was rebellious and was a witch, that I was supposed to marry him. God told him I was supposed to marry him. I went all over the place trying to get away from him. I was afraid to leave. I was afraid to get onto the parking lot because nobody was going to help me out there. I needed to stay in the church where there were at least other people around. Even one of my friends was with me and saw this happening and knew how bad it was, but nobody would do anything, except she did walk with me. But I was so freaked out from that experience, and they called the very next day to check in, and I told them what was going on. And they said, okay, we need to talk to you. Can you come in to our office so that we can really talk about this, and maybe we can give some suggestions for things that could be done to keep you safer? Oh, yes, please, anything.
Yeah,
So I did, but I got in trouble for it
of course.
because I shouldn't have said anything to anybody outside of the church,
Because
though he had said.
right. Because he was afraid it would make the church look bad.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And they had been concerned that they said, well, he grew up here. We went to school with him. We know how he is, and we're concerned for you. Should we talk to him? And I said, oh, no, absolutely not. I'll take care of this.
So the domestic violence group said that about
The pastor.
the pastor. They knew how he
Yes.
was.
Yes.
Okay, so I take it they didn't have a real warm view of him. Okay.
So, but the pastor was out of town. I dropped a note saying, look, here are some really easy things that could be done to keep me safe
Mhm.
and still have him coming to church and me coming to church here. Pastor got back and read it. He went off on me in church that morning after he got back, saying, how dare anybody go outside of the church to talk about something that happened at the church. He didn't name my name, and I explained to him, and he let it go more or less. I thought at the time that he had let it go, but things started getting worse and worse and worse after that. He would call me into his office and just start yelling at me.
Yeah.
And then I got a new job. And the new job that I had, I was able to hire a lot of people. It was a good job. But more and more and more, I started getting targeted and called into the office. It was unbelievable, some of the things that I was being accused of. There was one night he called me in and he started yelling at me, and I couldn't even, it took me days to just figure out who might have said what that could have been misconstrued as badly as it was in what he was telling me.
So, but he
Um,
had a confrontational way about him, you had mentioned. Like,
yes,
I had written down here that he called women heifers from the
yes,
pulpit
yes.
more than once.
Um,
Like, that was kind of a thing.
it was a thing.
That was a
Yeah.
thing.
And women were supposed to be silent and submissive, and in a way of they take whatever is handed to them. They just deal with it. If something's at fault in a relationship, it's the woman's fault. There were instances where people told me, and I believe because of who was telling me, that spousal rape was accepted. Um, a man turned his wife over his knee and spanked her with a frying pan, and that was bragged by the pastor's wife and thought funny by the pastor's wife. A newlywed couple, and she tried to prepare a meal for him, and he took it and threw it in the trash and said, "Start over again. This isn't good enough for me." And that was acceptable.
So
And there was,
a pervasive chauvinistic attitude where
oh yeah,
we're second-class citizens
yeah,
in the church and in the kingdom of God, really. And you had, that's disgusting. You had also mentioned about a 12-year-old girl who was called out and made an example of.
yeah. So there was a girl that, and that's when things started getting really, really bad overall. But there was a girl at the church. So she came to church one morning. She had on a jean skirt that came just below her knee, and a jean jacket and a V-neck shirt. It didn't show anything. And in a very technical way, it met all of the standards. But he stood her up that morning, and he, in front of the entire congregation, 500 people, said, you've got to start lining up to the standards better. You've got to stop dressing this way. You're going to end up raped. Don't come crying to me.
You're going to
Stood
end
her,
up raped.
yes. And to tell a 12-year-old that in front of a whole church full of people is horrible.
What did her
Then
parents say?
her dad didn't go to church there. Her mom did. Her mom accepted it. Her dad did not. Her dad started taking her with him to a Catholic church,
Good for you.
and that was pretty much that. Applause to that dad.
Yeah, exactly. And just to show what a level of grooming that an abusive pastor has in a church, that a mom would sit there and allow her daughter to be utterly humiliated in front of the whole church
Yes.
and do nothing.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's very telling.
Yeah. Things got bad enough that I was taking over-the-counter travel medication in order to not get sick at church or right after church. We were not allowed to go to the bathroom, even if it was a 3-hour service. If the pastor was upset about something and he started in on things and somebody got up to go to the bathroom, he'd yell at them and tell them to sit back down. And so there was an overall very controlling attitude in that way. But I started taking this over-the-counter travel medication because when I was a child, I had gotten excited sick every time that we went on vacation, or I got to stay the night with grandma or anything, and the doctor had said, give her half a Dramamine tablet, over-the-counter motion sickness, and that will settle that and keep her from throwing up. And it worked. So I started taking Dramamine before church so that I could get through the services.
I mean, when you hear yourself say that.
Yeah. I should have known something was wrong. And I think that I did in a way, but what do you do? Because where are you going to go? And you've got to stay in church.
Yeah.
And to leave the church is to leave God in their minds.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything's fear. You're afraid of God. You're afraid of the pastor. You're afraid of messing up. You're afraid of doing the wrong thing.
Yes.
What an awful situation. Your anxiety must have been through the roof.
It was.
Yeah.
It got so bad that one night they texted me. I got the text on the church parking lot. It must have been choir night or something, but I got the text while I was on the church parking lot, and I'm standing there talking to somebody, looked down at my phone, looked at the text. My knees started shaking so hard that I could barely stay standing, and I'm telling myself, you can't let this other person know how much you're shaking right now or why. But I was shaking so bad I could hardly stand up.
Wow. Yeah.
From a text.
Yeah. Trauma.
Yeah. So we got to church one night and things were bad. And I had found out that there was a new medication out called Bonine that was a motion sickness tablet that was chewable. So I could actually take it during church. Yeah. So things started getting bad one night during church, and I took Bonine. I took the full amount. He
Okay.
could have hit me over the head with a sledgehammer that night, and I don't think I would have responded. And so that night, he called me into his office, and he starts in on me, and his vein starts popping out of his head, and his face is all, and he's going off on me, and I'm just sitting there, and he turns and he looks at me, and he starts in again, and I just sat there, and he tried that several times, and I sat there, and I'm like, you are nothing but a bully. You just want to make me cry.
Yeah.
That is all that's going on here. You just want to make me cry. And I got home that night and I started thinking about it, and I realized that I had been in a situation when I was a kid. We knew somebody who had been in an abusive situation, and my mom had a conversation with me then, and she said, if you ever get married and your husband hits you, leave. Don't look back. Don't think, but I married him. Leave. Walk out and never go back. And I thought, and if my husband hit me one time, I would do that. I would walk out and I would never go back. But I am sitting in a church where the pastor is doing everything but hit me, and verbally worse.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here taking it. If he does it again, I have to leave.
Yes.
But it was if he does it again.
Right.
So he did. And that is where that recording comes in.
Okay, so set this up because I'm going to just play a little clip from this. You actually went through this abuse. You sat there, you took it, then you turned around and had the courage to go back and get the audio.
Yeah.
I love that.
I don't know how I had, well, I do, because I was so convinced that it must not really be happening, that it must all really be in my head.
Yeah.
I wanted to get the CD because I knew it was the one opportunity that I had that I could have it recorded, that I could go back later and listen again.
Yeah.
So I was going to get the CD, and then I was going to listen to it later so that I knew that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and that everything.
Okay, set it up for us. So you're sitting in church, and what happens to prompt this psychotic rant?
So we had been at a rally on Friday night, and at the rally, the evangelist that was preaching said something during the service about women being things.
Things.
And he used the verse, he that desireth a wife desireth a good thing. Things. You women are things. So the women didn't get up and preach him the way that Edwin Young wanted them to. Not even his wife got up and preached him on that one.
So when you say preached him, you mean up yelling?
Amen. Hallelujah. Yeah. Go.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, just for in case anybody's watching this who doesn't know what that means.
Stand up, applaud, yell amen, preach it, run the aisles over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they weren't cheering him on. Sunday morning, Edwin Young referred to that rally service and the fact that he called women things and that the women didn't get up and cheer him on about it. And one of the women that was sitting either just beside me or just behind me poked me and said, "What?" Yeah. And I whispered that he that desireth a wife desireth a good thing, so things. And when I did that, this is the response that happened.
Okay, yeah.
That must have been all in my head.
All in your head. Okay, I'm going to play that clip right now.